and it's time to go into the second part of this video. So if you've missed the highest rated ones, definitely do check out the video that I'll be linking down below. But yeah, I am kind of going through Goodreads stats, kind of seeing like what are these considered to be the best books that I have read on my Goodreads account. And so I have data on there for like 12 years at this point, about almost 800 books on there. So let's see which ones score the highest in that video, and now we're going to be diving into which ones have the lowest rating. I do think that this one is going to be one in which I'm going to be skipping a lot more books, because there will be books that I, for example, had to read when I was learning French, for example. I definitely expect that book to be in there. And there are going to be books that like have so little ratings, or that like only that are only like available in certain languages, that I'm going to be skipping over. But let's dive into the ones. So let me start a recording here and then let's dive into it. So I still have my list ordered according to the best average rating, so let's turn that around. So without further ado, lowest average rating. So this is what I meant. I expected this one to be there. Book The Suspense à Biarritz is a book that I had to read when I was learning French. A Willekeurige Vrouw is only available in Dutch. That's a language course book, also language course, Dutch. The Red House by Mark Haddon. We will consider that to be my lowest rated book. And I don't remember anything about this book, but Mark Haddon is the author of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which I definitely did enjoy quite a lot. I've heard some bad things about the representation in there, so I won't go into that in any case. I'm not an own voice, so I wouldn't be able to tell that. But I definitely did like it when I was reading it, so I wanted to read more by Mark Haddon. So I read The Red House, but I actually know nothing about it at this point, and as you can tell, it also had very low rating because I only gave it a 2-star rating. Let me see if I can actually see what this thing is about. After his mother's death, Richard, a newly remarried hospital consultant, decides to build bridges with his estranged sister, inviting Angela and her family for a weekend in a renter's house on the Welsh border. Also almost bored just by reading that, so wouldn't say that that is something to look forward to. Then we have a book that I read for Spanish that I'm not going to go into. The Gathering by Anne Enright. I had to read this book for university, and I have another Anne Enright. I actually have the same book on my TBR, so I shouldn't, because apparently I already read it. Gave it 2 stars, clearly don't remember anything about it. This is definitely going to be more or less the entire video is going to be me going, I don't remember anything about this book. Because especially when I didn't like a book, I have to like severely dislike a book for me to remember something about it. Then we get Slap, which isn't available. Then The Red Party by Lulu Wang, probably I could count this one. You know, I'm just gonna go till I get books that I actually know something about. You know, I'm only going to count books that I remember anything about. That's going to make this one a little bit better. Okay, so then we start off with The Body Artist by Don DeLillo, which has an average rating of 3.25, but I would say is boring as hell. It's weird as hell as well, but I actually often do like weird stuff. So basically in The Body Artist, we're kind of looking at this contortionist who has the ability to kind of transform her body by through movement, and she has lost somebody in her past, and she starts to imagine there being somebody in her attic, and she takes care of that person. But it's very weird, it's extremely weird, and it is like only 95 pages or something, but it was such a struggle to get through. I was like, yeah, that's a quick, easy read for me to read between, for me to fit into my reading, but oh, Jesus, I did definitely underestimate that, because that was so long for me to get through. Second, we will count Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James, or James P.D. P.D. James. And That Comes to Pemberley obviously is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. It's a story that takes place like years or decades, maybe even after Pride and Prejudice, in which there is an assassination on, I think, on Willoughby. Is his name Willoughby? Jesus, why don't I remember character names? His name is Willoughby, right? Basically on Lydia Bennet's husband, I think. Or no, somebody else dies and Lydia Bennet's husband is accused of being the murderer, I think. So I watched that as a sort of mini-series, I think, or maybe a TV movie or something. Quite liked it, but I would say that it's really a waste of time to read this, and so I only gave it 2 stars. Next up would be The Casual Vacancy by J.K. Rowling. Don't remember anything about this, so clearly shouldn't have given it 4 stars, because yeah, I don't remember anything about it. And actually, if I think back on this, I actually think it's quite a boring one, but yeah, apparently I thought differently at that time. Wicked House of Rohan is a romance story, very short, don't know anything about it anymore. Ghost at a Watchman. I will count this one as my 3rd book. I don't really remember anything about it, but I remember the reason why this has such a low rating on my side in any case. So Ghost at a Watchman is the sequel to Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. It is a book that she wrote while she was still alive, obviously, but she never published it during her lifetime, and she never wanted it to be published. And there's good reason for that, because it's really not that great. So we are looking at Scout, who is in her 20s, maybe 30s, returning to her hometown. That I do remember. Don't remember anything else that happened during this book, but I would definitely say that don't read it. If you love To Kill a Mockingbird, don't taint that experience by reading Ghost at a Watchman. It was definitely not worth it for me. So that will be my 3rd lowest rated in terms of books that I can actually remember anything about. Fanny Hill, or Memoir of a Woman of Pleasure. I know the premise, I don't really remember the experience, but so it is a story about a woman of pleasure from, like, I don't know, Victorian era probably, but clearly I didn't like this experience of reading it, so yeah. I won't count it. I will only count the ones that I actually have anything interesting to say about. Shuttlecock by Grace Lift, don't really remember. So Fanny Hill, a woman of, don't remember anything, like, don't remember too much about it. Shuttlecock, remember nothing about it. The Beautiful Cassandra by Jane Austen. I feel bad putting so much Jane Austen stuff on this list, but yeah, the other one was just a retelling or a story based off of anything written by Jane Austen. And I feel like my rating for The Beautiful Cassandra is also not really a rating of Jane Austen's writing, it's just more a rating of that collection, because I feel like you can definitely see the voice of Jane Austen in there already, but it's definitely just these short, small dabblings of writing that I don't think that she would ever have put forward herself neither. I think she enjoyed it as a nice writing exercise, but she wouldn't have been like, hey, here's my next great piece of writing that I want you guys to all explore. And definitely that edition of The Beautiful Cassandra I feel is a little bit annoying, because like The Beautiful Cassandra is a story that's like, what, 3 pages long or something, and that entire collection contains like 30 different pieces of writing that are like 2 pages long, so I don't think that you should call that collection The Beautiful Cassandra. You should call that like youth writing, like the youthful writings of Jane Austen or something like that. So I definitely didn't like the experience of reading that collection. Yeah, I don't know enough about these books to talk about them. The Chimes, that I find sad, because so on 5th space I'm going to say The Chimes by Anna Smale. I don't remember too much about it though, but it is set in London, and there indeed are these sort of, there was this sort of like beautiful magical realism element to it, and I think it also has to do a lot with music and magic of music. And I definitely want to reread this at some point, because I very much enjoyed it, but I don't know why people dislike it so much. But so apparently it was also a Booker nominee, and it's just one of the books that I definitely read that I enjoyed a lot, so I don't like seeing it there, so that's why I want to include it in my video. I'm gonna give that 6 spots to one of the Vampire Diaries books, so I quite like the Vampire Diaries as a series, so I also wanted to try those books. But the books are quite different, and all the things that I liked about the series seem to be missing from the books. So I would say, like, if you don't like the Vampire Diaries but you still want a vampire story, maybe try out the Vampire Diaries. But if you like the Vampire Diaries, I don't think the books are worth a lot. UFO in Her Eyes, don't have a lot of memories about it. Story of Kullervo, just remember being disappointed. Don't know enough about these. Scarlet Letter, yeah, I know the premise, but Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Let's give that my 7th position. So Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad is a classic, and I had to read this the first time, barely understood what I was reading, and part of it is probably my own fault, because I don't like to look up books that I don't understand, because that's basically a tactic we at least always learned when learning a new language, is to try and read through the words that you don't understand, and then if you cannot make sense of it, then do look it up. And in this case, there was this one word that kept on popping up that I didn't know what it meant, but it also wasn't really hindering my understanding of what was happening. But that's just what I remember, being frustrated with that word, and then just not really understanding a whole lot of what was happening in general with this one. But I also reread it as an audiobook a couple of years ago, and that's actually a memory that will stick with me forever, because it's like, it was the first night that my cat went out, and she kind of jumped off of the balcony, and I couldn't get her back on the balcony, so I stayed up all night basically waiting for this cat to return. And while waiting for her, I listened to the audiobook of Heart of Darkness, and I enjoyed it more than I did the first time, though I still wouldn't really say that like I know what happens in this one. I obviously know the bare minimum of this premise because of Apocalypse Now, though I also wouldn't say that I absolutely enjoyed that movie. So yeah, this one didn't really do it for me. 7th position, let me give to A Long Way Down by Nick Hornby, which I definitely enjoyed quite a lot. I think it's a nice and charming book, but it's probably so average that a lot of people just giving it average rating. So in this one we are following a group of strangers who either get stuck in an elevator altogether or get stuck on like the roof of a building altogether or something like that. But these are all these this is a sort of like story in which like a random group of broken strangers meet each other, and then talking together, and then through their meeting, through talking with each other, they kind of get their life back in order a little bit. Liked it just fine. Then my 8th position, I think, goes to The Circle by Dave Eggers. I hated this book. I don't understand why some people like this book. It's a dystopian, it's all about like social media, I guess, a little bit. It's a sort of company in which your position within the company is kind of based on your participation along with this sort of circle network. It's very like thriller-esque about social media influence and things like that. But you know, it just annoyed me to no end. I know that I have a booktube channel, didn't have it yet when I was reading this book, so in principle I'm also somewhat concerned with the amount of like subscribers I have with view counts and stuff like that, but in general that's really not that important to me, and so I also try to keep on to that when looking at like my booktube stats. Try to remember that that's not the reason why I have a booktube channel. But so this book is so focused on those types of things that it just really annoyed me, and I don't know too much about the like later developments in this book anymore, but I remember that I hated this book and that I couldn't understand why it was such a hype. Never watched the movie adaptation, even though it has Tom Hanks, which is one of my favorite authors, which is one of my favorite actors, but I just totally hated this book, which I totally don't see reflected in that rating. Why did I give it 3-star rating when all my memories of this book are so bad? So I think that is 8, right? Let's put Black Leopard Red Wolf on 9, which I didn't give a rating, as you can see, because I don't know how to read that book. I don't understand all of what happened in it, so I guess I should give it a low rating as well. I gave it 2 shots as well. So this is a African-inspired adult fantasy story written by Marlon James, who's previously won the Booker for A Brief History of 7 Killings. Black Leopard Red Wolf has a lot of triggering content. It's very like brutal in its representation of, it's very gory, it has a lot of sex scenes in it as well, it's very shocking, but I just also constantly lost focus while reading this one and lost like the thread of the story. I was constantly feeling like, whoa shit, I've totally forgotten, must have totally spaced out because I can no longer follow. So I tried it twice, but I always had the same experience where I was always like, Jesus, I've lost the thread of the story again. So I don't know whether it is actually me or whether this is the writing style or the way in which this story is structured that just meant that I was always getting lost. But so I haven't totally given up on this. This is in principle going to be a series, but yeah, I don't know. It's one of those books that I cannot wrap my head around it. I didn't totally dislike it. I didn't love it. I was just so lost with it that I cannot trust my own judgment or cannot form a judgment about it at all. Then we get to, this will be 10, right? Uncommon Type by Tom Hanks. I think that is a little bit harsh to give it, like to have it that low in my list, though of course I have neglected a lot of other books in there, but I definitely thought it was decent. This is a short story collection by Tom Hanks. Like a lot of short story collections, there are good stories in there and there are stories in there that are not as worthy, but I definitely do remember there being some stories in there that I enjoyed a lot. But of course, as I said, I have a bias for Tom Hanks, so maybe that's just the reason. But I definitely remember there being a sort of story of a time traveler who goes back to like the World Fair all the time to meet up with somebody there, I think, but that I definitely enjoyed a lot. But so yeah, overall I would say I definitely did enjoy my experience with that one, and so would recommend it. I wouldn't, like, it's not like a top priority or anything like that, because I don't think I would ever put a short story collection that high on somebody's radar, but I definitely had a good time with that one. So these are the 10 books that are not really my lowest rated books on Goodreads, but yeah, these are the ones that like I feel like people will have heard about, people that like the ones that are a little bit more on people's radar than some of the other ones are, and definitely the ones that I actually know what to say about them, because otherwise this video would have definitely just been like, I don't know what this book is about anymore. But yeah, apparently I gave it that star rating, or yeah. So these were my 2 videos about Goodreads, good ratings, low ratings. I think I might do a sequel to this in which I'm looking at my top ratings, so I'll be looking at my 5 stars and then the books that I gave 5-star ratings that have the highest average rating, and the books that I gave 1 star that have the lowest average rating, for example. That will be my continuation to this little project. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and definitely let me know down below if you actually enjoyed any of those books that I've just tried to beat down, but still, a lot of times I still didn't know too much about them anymore.